Greetings YouTube, Alan Louv back with another video. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm being consistent with these videos. But a lot of you guys liked my Warrior video, and one commenter even said, looking forward to the Guardian one because, well, I'm a Guardian player. And yeah, so I just figured my next video would be Guardian. I literally just watched round 1 of the celebrational of Kelvin versus Brody, and Betsy was, fairly competitive there. He wasn't able to close the game, unfortunately, because Brody had the... What's that one card? That instant brute card that banishes your hand and blocks no fear. This card's kind of crazy. But overall, just wanted to share my thoughts on the new Guardians, the future of Guardian, Bravo, things like that. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And let's get right into it. I don't think there's much else to say. So first, let's talk about Bravo. Overall, I don't think he's getting too much support this set. Maybe a few cards can change up the list, but overall mostly the same. Bravo didn't need the help anyway. So Crippling and Starstruck are just insanely good cards, and the other Guardian, the card pool in Guardian for heavy hitters is definitely more focused on the new Guardians. And it's funny because before all these heavy hitter spoilers, I was pretty convinced that Bravo would LL this year. But after looking at like some of the warrior support, some of the brute support, two classes that are, traditionally bad matchups for Guardian, I'm not quite sure that will stay the case. So maybe I'll get to play Bravo for longer than I expected. But anyways, that's mostly the thoughts on Bravo. There's not too much support, maybe some side grades here and there, but nothing too crazy. So let's talk about Betsy. Whenever an attack you control wagers, you may pay 2. If you do, the attack gets +1 in overpower. So Betsy is what I would call the spiritual successor to Bravo. Similar effect, pay 2, overpower, +1 instead of dominate. So the +1 is really impactful. For example, if you have something like... we'll talk about these cards later, but like the headpiece that lets you wager any attack, or money where your mouth is, things like that. You could wager a CNC, pay 2 to give it +1 in overpower, which is really good. That means they can only block with 1 action card, and defense reactions can't be put to CNC, so that's a great combo, things like that. But overall, my thoughts are that overpower is still weaker than dominate. So dominate, only 1 card from hand. Overpower is only 1 action card. That means previously, if you're coming in with, say, a Spinal Overpower, they can still block with a card and a sync from hand, whereas versus Bravo, that sync needs to be in Arsenal. And that's very impactful because, 1, they need to have the sync in Arsenal already, and 2, if they're putting a defense reaction in Arsenal, you can sort of sniff it out, because if they're holding on to it, like if you're playing against Phi, he goes to Chain Link 3, he doesn't play a Lava Burst, or things like that. You can sort of kind of get a feel for when they have it. As for overpower, they can just have it whenever. Like, they don't need to like save it in Arsenal specifically. So that's that. But the +1, I think, somewhat offsets this. +1 somewhat offsets this. Because, if you overpower a CNC for 7, that's a breakpoint now. They can still block with 1 card and 2 block armors, but that's still taking a lot. So the +1 is good, but overall, I think the biggest struggle with the new Guardians is that Crippling and Starstruck are OP. Just the fact that they don't have Crippling or Starstruck. Crippling is still like the best, disruptive Guardian card. They need to block 8. If not, they discard 2. You can just sort of keep throwing Cripplings or Starstrucks and things like that to like lock them out of the game, whereas the new Guardians are quite different. I know people don't love the whole aggro mid-range control sort of archetypes for Flesh and Blood decks, but I think they're still useful as sort of terms to talk about like the general feel of something. So whereas Bravo has Crippling and Starstruck and all these very disruptive attacks that can make him play more aggressive and play with bigger hands, it feels like, Betsy and Victor are sliding more towards that control-ish style where you need to kind of block a bit more and set up bigger turns, things like that. Whereas Bravo, you could just, chain and go. Betsy, you can definitely do that with, the wager and things like that. But I do think Betsy will struggle a bit into decks that can block well, and not just, full aggro decks. Because full aggro decks don't really exist anymore. Like, heroes as a whole can be categorized as sort of aggro. But for example, even Fi will run sinks and reinforce. Katsu has block threes. He can play sink. He can play flick flack. So it's easier to hate Betsy out of the metagame is what I would say, whereas that's not necessarily the same case with Bravo, just because of Crippling and Starstruck. So moving on to Victor. TBH, I have no idea what to think about Victor. Seems very control heavy. So Victor, his ability is first time you create a gold token from an effect you control, draw a card. So this is obviously great. If ever you wager a gold or something, you get to draw a card. Whether or not that's useful, maybe you get to arsenal it or something, that remains to be seen. But it's still a pretty good card, or a pretty good hero ability. And then his second ability, the first time each turn you would fail to win a clash. Instead, you may destroy a gold you control. If you do, put one of the revealed cards on bottom of its owner's deck, then clash again. So basically, this is just adding more consistency to your clash effects. And as we saw in the previous Warrior video, there's a lot of block cards that clash. So it does feel like Victor in general wants to block more and play this more like grindy attrition style game plan. And that's sort of reflected in his weapon as well. I do think of the heavy hitters, my initial impression of Victor is probably the lowest. I think he can definitely succeed into matchups where you can just afford to block a lot. But in general, I don't really like to play these fatigue game plans because that's just letting your opponent win the game rather than you winning the game. That's just how I feel. Obviously, there were some matchups in the past where that's just kind of what you had to do, like Chain, for example, or even Lexi. You kind of have to threaten fatigue in some sort of way. But Victor's really kind of seems to be very all in on that strategy, and I don't really like the fatigue heal Oldham type thing. And Victor just seems like the newer version of that, but not as good. You don't have ice, you don't have Oldham D-react and things like that. But so overall, I'm not too high on Victor, but he definitely has potential. Let's just say that. So one other thing that I want to talk about is Betsy sort of somewhat or cares about gold, might, vigor somewhat equally. And then for Victor, cares more about gold and clash. So another thing I don't like about sort of decks that incentivize clashing and blocking is that the more block clash cards you put in your deck, the less likely you're going to win your clash. But that is offset with his hero abilities somewhat, so maybe that is okay. But yeah, let's move on. So High Riser, limited weapon. It's your token weapon. You're probably never going to see this in CC. Even when if Anathos LLs with Bravo, you probably still would run a build that plays around Titan's Fist instead. But yeah, mainly just a limited card. If there's ever a world where this is a CC viable weapon, then you can at me on Twitter or something. Miller's Grindstone, this will be sort of Victor's weapon. Cost 3, attacks for 4. When this hits a hero, clash with them. If you win, destroy the top card of their deck. If they win, put a -1 counter on this. So this one's interesting because it once again plays into that Victor fatigue attrition style game plan. But if you start losing your clashes, then you start getting -1 counters. Does the -1 counter really matter? Yes, because if it becomes 3, your opponent just gets to block with 1 card. But also at the same time, if you're fatiguing your opponent, you don't really care about the damage you're doing. You're caring more about getting a card from them. So maybe the -1 counter doesn't even matter that much. Like if you're swinging for 2, that's still annoying. If you're swinging for 1, that's still annoying. If you're swinging for 0, obviously that's really bad. But maybe there's a world where you don't run a shield and you just run 2 Miller's Grindstones, and that would be pretty funny. Maybe you would go like, you can even do something dumb like Time Snap and double Miller's Grindstone. But yeah, moving on. Aurum Aegis, Victor Specialization, Offhand Equipment, Legendary Temper 2. This counts as gold. So this counts as gold. I feel like that just means with any effect where you want to destroy a gold, yeah, You can pop this shield instead, so you can block with 2 with it. It has 1 counter. Then you can use any effect you want that pops gold. You can play Cash In. Probably won't because Victor's not an aggressive deck. But for example, his hero ability, if you fail a clash and you really want to win that clash, you can pop your shield and then reveal a card and then reclash basically by bottoming 1 card from either your opponent's or your deck. So the shield is cool. Definitely, plays into his hero ability and playstyle, but again, I'm not super huge on Victor, but we'll see. Stonewall Impasse, a limited card, only is temper 2 if you win your clash. If you lose the clash, it blocks once and then it dies, so that feels really bad. Once again, there's already 2 shields in the game that is better than this. The one from Round the Table and the Buckler. Steelbraid Buckler, yeah. Gauntlets of Iron Will. This is basically a Crater Fist side grade. It's a temper 2 arms. But its effect is when this defends, the next time an attack would gain attack this chain link. Instead, it gains that much -1. So this only applies to the chain link. And I'm struggling to think of too many use cases for this. But against Katsu, for example, this is great. If they play a Red Whelming for 4, you can just block with 2 armor for 4. They can't breaking skills it. You're getting your clean block. That is good and dandy. It's largely a side grade. It's not a necessary purchase if you already have Crater Fist, but I do think that I probably would still get it just because even if you run into Katsu or any other deck with attack reactions, like even Warriors will have attack reactions. Like if you're playing against Dory and you want to block like 8, they can't go to 9. So I would probably think of this as a strict upgrade, but only so very slightly. So not necessary, but I probably still will be getting it. Golden Glare. Well, and that's also because like in the past year, I can't even remember the last time I've used Crater Fist's ability. Like I've been playing Bravo for almost 3 years at this point, and I don't think I've used the Crater Fist more than like 3 or 4 times in all of my games. And maybe that's a me problem. Maybe there are situations where I could be using it and I'm not. But for the most part, I'll start thinking about it more and looking at my games, whether I'm like, oh, this could be a Crater Fist turn or something like that. But overall, not really a huge fan of using Crater Fist like that. Golden Glare Victor Specialization Helmet. When this defends with 2 or more yellow cards, create a gold token. So this synergizes with his hero ability, of course. You can block with this and 2 yellow cards, and when you do that, you draw a card. Just the weird thing is that it has to be yellow cards, so it adds like some inconsistency to the deck because, you're a Guardian, you want to run a lot of blues. Your hammer costs 3 to swing. So I don't know how useful this really is. Because, for example, let's say you want to full block out, you block with 2 cards on 1 attack, and you block with 2 cards plus this helmet on another attack. You draw a card, it's a red, and you do nothing with your turn. If you draw a card and it's a blue and you get to swing your hammer, then this helmet is amazing, especially because you get to use it twice. But no, it's a blade break. You get to use it once. Just kidding. So I'm not too high on this card. I think Crown of Providence likely is still better, unfortunately. But in terms of like if you're a new player and you don't want to shell out all that money, this card will probably be like $1 or less. So that'll be great. Good time, chapeau, French Marvel Betsy Wen. But anyways, this card is amazing. Destroy a gold you control. The next attack this turn gets when this attacks a hero, wager a might and a vigor token with them, go again. So this helmet is really insane because I did not expect LSS to print sort of so many helmets that like sort of play with the engine of these heroes. Usually you see that in like arms or chest pieces, things like that. But now everyone's basically getting a helmet. They're like trying to say like, oh, not every deck needs, Crown of Providence or, Balance of Justice. And that's probably going to be true as the game moves forward. But, Crown of Providence is still just a crazy card. But anyways, being able to wager any attack like on command as long as you have a gold is really great because that means you can pay an extra 2, give it overpower, and then it'll keep wagering more. And that's sort of the thing with Betsy. You just want to keep wagering, keep creating those tokens, and when you keep creating those tokens, all is really good. And this is why I sort of think Betsy kind of wants all 3 tokens somewhat equally. Vigor is really amazing because an extra resource, there's a lot of 4-cost Guardian attacks, that's an extra resource you can possibly use for Betsy. Like, for example, if you have a Vigor and you play CNC, you have 2 floating. Now you can give it Overpower +1. Might is obviously good. Might is good because, you're giving your attack +1, and we'll see later with the Guardian cards, there's a lot of cards that synergize with being higher attack. So that's important as well. And then gold is what will let you use this helmet to keep, chaining those Might and Vigor tokens over and over. So I think all 3 tokens are pretty important, and just finding the balance of all 3 will probably be the hardest part of building the deck. But in general, you still just want to do Guardian things, a lot of blues, a lot of big attacks, and you probably will have like a pretty decent deck. But again, I still think Betsy is like a bit weaker than Bravo, and if the meta becomes more hostile towards Guardian, it's going to be like a tough time for these decks. Stand Ground. This one is kind of interesting because it could technically be Civic Steps without the downside. But you need to have your tokens, which is really important. You need to have both, basically, to get the full Temper 2 value. And so because of that, I still imagine Civic Steps will be like the go-to Guardian like piece, even though it gives your opponent a Quicken. Quicken is something you can play around against most decks. So good limited card, again, but, it is what it is. Bet Big, Betsy Specialization. Oh, so 5 Majestics for each class again. Specializations are good. Some of the Guardian Majestics are good, but 2 of them are blocks, and I'll talk about that when I get there. But so Betsy Specialization, it's a 4 for 8. When this attacks, you may wager gold, might, and vigor. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Betsy can use her hero ability for each wager. Or wagers, you may pay 2. Someone will need to correct me in the comments or something, but I'm not sure if you are able to use Betsy's hero ability multiple times on an attack that wagers multiple times. But overall, 4 for 8 wagers 3 of your important tokens, and that's really good. With 2 blues, you can give this +1 in Overpower. It'll be 9. And then creating a gold, might, and vigor are all very great, obviously. And it's probably just instant 3 of in every Betsy deck, as all of the specializations are for the most part. There's nothing too crazy about this. It doesn't directly disrupt your opponent, which is one reason why I think Betsy is also a little bit weaker than Bravo. It seems like Betsy is leaning more towards cards that gain additional rate with these tokens, whereas, Bravo is a little worse on rate, but you can block out, and, if you're playing Tunic, then you can slap back out of nowhere with a disruptive effect. Trying to build Betsy to be as disruptive as possible can work, but it really feels like you have to chain your disruption, because you have to keep wagering, you have to keep making these tokens. Otherwise, once you fall behind, you just turn into like a blocking and hammering deck, which can work for Guardian. Obviously, a lot of block 3s and your hammer is good, but if you don't have a window to get back into the game, then it's really tough for Guardian in a lot of matchups. Moving on, we have Prime to Fight. This card is what I was referring to, basically, about how a lot of these new cards seem to be focusing on giving Guardian better rate, but not necessarily better disruption. If they gave Guardian better disruption than what Bravo currently has, then that would be too much, so I understand. But this card's really cool. It's a 5 for 9 base. If you've controlled a Vigor token this turn, this costs 1 less to play. If you've controlled a Might token this turn, this gets +1. So I'm pretty sure this works if you create the Vigor and Might on the same turn, but having them pop on your current turn, it also works because it's past tense. And then if you have a Vigor, it costs 3. If you have a Might, it goes to 11. So if we want to sort of think about this card in like a rate sense, Spinal is 5 for 9 with an on-hit. This is potentially, if you don't count the cards that created those tokens, this is basically a 4 for 10, which is, +2 of the rate of most cards, because like Debilitate, Chokeslam, those are 4 for 8s. Betsy Specialization is a 4 for 8. So this is basically a +2 to rate if you can satisfy its conditions. And I'm saying +2 because, if you have a Vigor and a Might, then this turns into 3 for 11, which is great. Wait, 3 for 11? Yeah, 3 for 11, which is great. Really great, actually. But you need to create those tokens in the first place. So if you don't count the cards that create those tokens, then you can just call this a 3 for 11, and it's amazing. If you only get 1, it can be like a 4 for 9, or it can be a 5 for 11, something like that. Overall, it's just a card that increases your rate. It will be good for matchups where you want to be the aggressor, like maybe against Dromai or maybe against Dash or things like that. So overall, a good card, but I wouldn't say it's like amazing. But it's probably an instant include in Betsy. Bravo, not so much. And Victor, I have no idea, to be honest. Golden Sun. This is Victor's specialization. As an additional cost to play this, destroy a gold. If you do, this gets +3 and overpower. So this is another 4 for 10 above rate card. And then when you win a clash revealing this, create a gold token. So it's also yellow, which is great because it synergizes with the helmet. But do you really want to be running that many other yellow cards like yellow disable or yellow thunderquake? I don't know, but it's all right. But 4 for 10 is pretty good. Making gold with Victor probably isn't too hard. If you're winning your clashes, you're playing Test of Strength, all that stuff. So overall, it's a good card, but it feels counterintuitive to me with the sort of Victor game plan that wants to be very fatigue and attrition based. Obviously, if you're playing Victor into Dromai or, Pistol Dash or even Kano, you kind of need to be the aggressor, so you need some cards like this, but it doesn't really impress me, this ability, because sure, you can high roll, you win a clash with this, you create a gold, you draw this card, which is pretty cool. But actually, no, there's that one card that lets you set up your clash, right? So maybe that'll be interesting synergy with this. I just thought about that. But once again, overall, Victor doesn't really click in my head. So a lot of my opinions may be biased in that way. But feel free to prove me wrong. I could be super wrong, and maybe Victor will be, one of the top 8s at this coming Pro Tour, or he gets a bunch of LL points. But my initial reaction is probably not. Boast. Blue, no cost, so it doesn't synergize with Anathos, but doesn't matter if you're on Victor in playing Miller's Grindstone. This gets +X while defending, where X is twice the number of clashes you've won this turn. So let's say you block with Test of Strength, you win a clash, and then you block with Boast. It is a blue 5 block. If you win 2 clashes, this card becomes absolutely insane. And that's more applicable to, go wide decks. But go, for example, against Phi, you can block out their Mounting Anger, you can block out their Sword, and then you block their Lava Burst with this, and you just covered up a majority of their turn with 3 cards, which is crazy. But once again, as I said with Victor, finding that balance between the amount of block cards you have and the attack actions to actually win your clashes will be the determining factor. And you definitely don't want to give your opponent those tokens that you're making. So overall, it's a playstyle I'm not really looking forward to, but I can see the synergy and what direction they're going with. As to how good it will be, I don't know. Trounce is another Majestic, another block card. When this defends, clash, put the revealed cards on bottom, then clash again. If a hero wins both clashes, they create gold, might, and vigor. So this one is interesting because in Victor, if, once again, you're playing a more defensive style, I don't know how useful Gold, Might, and Vigor is. Maybe the Vigor can be okay, like you can make a Surge, or you can do something with it, play a 4-cost attack like Golden Sun. That's true. If you do win both clashes, then you can play Golden Sun as a 3 for 10, 3 for 11, because you have a Might also. So that's cool. But I'm not loving it. Winning 2 clashes against some decks is definitely very doable. Once again, especially with Hero's Victor ability, you have a lot of room to, fix your clashes, but that requires gold to do so. So a more Victor slated Majestic, I would say. And then we have these round the table, these 3 round the table red attacks. They're all tower effects that synergize with having 13 or more attack. Obviously, the 9 one is the easiest to hit because that means you just need to pummel it. With a Vigor, you can pummel it. And then when this hits, destroy all aura tokens they control. This is definitely quite impactful and limited because, everyone's making agilities, they're making mights, they're making vigors, and then that could potentially just stop your opponent's turn for the most part. But overall, in CC, I don't think these will have too much impact, if at all. Over the top, 3 for 6. If this has attack greater than its base, it gets overpower. Seems okay. It could be a way to finish games, like if you're playing the auras that buff your Guardian attacks on that turn. It seems fine. But once again, probably a limited card. Stacked in your favor, go again. Your attack actions get +3 while defending. At the start of your turn, destroy this, draw a card, then put a card from your hand on top of your deck. So this one is weird because, oh, now that I'm looking at it, you're stacking your deck on offense, basically. So this is for when you clash on your turn, because at the start of your turn, you destroy it, you draw a card, then you put a card from your hand on top of your deck. So then you can play an attack clash, you stack your deck on top to win the clash, and then like maybe you make some gold or you make some whatever. But quite notably, you can't stack your deck for the blocking clash cards. I guess that would be too broken. But overall, this is kind of like Stonewall Confidence, but worse. And it blocks 2, so I'm not too big on it. But maybe it'll be good and limited, especially if you're trying to fatigue or something and you get to play this turn 1, and then all of a sudden you get to, block 6 on all your cards, which is crazy. Command Respect, when this hits a hero, if it has greater attack than its base, destroy a card in their arsenal. So these are the cards that I was talking about that synergizes with your might tokens. If you give this +1, it turns into a 3 for 7, and it turns on its on-hit. It's basically like a baby CNC, except it doesn't have the defense reaction, can't be played to this, which is actually quite important because if they have a defense reaction in Arsenal, they can just block this fine and dandy. Concuss, I think, is the better one of the two because you get to take a card from their hand. The only thing is they get to pick what card they discard. If you're attacking their arsenal, there's only one arsenal for the most part, and you get that no matter what. But overall, I still think Concuss is the better one. If you're chaining might tokens, then you get to come in for 3 for 7 if it hits. Maybe you give it Overpower with Betsy, things like that. Like you don't even need a might token. You can wager this with your headpiece and then use Betsy's ability to give it +1 and Overpower. You can do Money Where Your Mouth Is. There's a bunch of other, wage cards that you can run. So this card, I think, is probably a staple in Betsy. I don't imagine it finds room in Bravo because Bravo already has a lot of premium red cards. But yeah. Moving on to Thunk. When you win a clash revealing this, create a might token. So, on first thought, I didn't really think these will have much impact, if at all, in CC at least. Obviously, in Victor, if you want to clash a lot, then having these cards can be good. I think Blue Thunk is probably the most important one because it's another blue 6 attack card, which is kind of crazy that they printed another one, to be honest. Like if you're playing Bravo and you just want rouse consistency for days, you can take out like Imposing or Showtime or something and put these Thunks in because they're more poppers. I'm actually quite surprised they printed this card. I didn't think they would give like Bravo more poppers, for example, blue poppers at least. But it is underrated. It's 5 for 6, but like that doesn't matter because you're never actually playing this card. Like you can just play Anathos and swing your weapon or something. So this one is kind of surprising to me, but it is what it is. Wallop, this one doesn't really matter as much because, well, it's not a popper as blue. But creating a Vigor on Clash, once again, maybe there's some, Victor situation there. Maybe you run the yellows because you just want this to win your Clash, but you don't actually plan on playing them. Big Bop and Bigger Than Big. These are basically the Guardian Auras that will give +5 on your next turn, and you also get to wager. So when Heavy Hitters was first spoiled, blue Bigger Than Bigger was definitely something people talked about, where you can pitch stack this in Betsy, and then you can 2 cards, so 4 cards total, but over 2 turns. You play Bigger Than Big 1 turn, you pass, and on your next turn you keep 2 cards, you swing Anathos, you wager it, and it will be 10 overpower, and that's a great way to close games. And yes, I agree, that's a great way to close games, but I think my issue with these Guardians isn't about, grinding out long matchups. Like, Guardian is good at playing versus Guardian type of thing, But, how does Betsy fare into Ninja? How does Betsy fare into Dromai? How does Betsy fare into Kano? How does Betsy fare into Bolton, Warriors, Brutes, things like that? And pitch stacking this against those does not matter. So, I mean, maybe against Warrior it can matter if it really goes long and you're playing a super defensive deck, but overall, I think these cards can maybe find space in the deck. It's interesting because, like, maybe if you want to run 1 red, then you can run, like, Imposing, and turn 1, you Imposing into Bigger Than Big instead of Showtime because these Guardians don't have Showtime because it's a Bravo specialization. So being able to get +5 on your Guardian attack, it doesn't have to be an attack action. It can be your hammer. It can be an attack action, is pretty good, and having the wager on it automatically means you can pay 2 to give Overpower. The cards are good. As for which one I like better, I'm not sure. Once again, I kind of equate the tokens in Betsy pretty similarly. They all have their upside. But yeah, overall, good cards. Not sure how they fit into the deck for now. Pint of Strong and Stout. Card's pretty good. Creates a Might and a Vigor token. Go again. It's basically 0 for 2 go again in a way. worst case scenario if you don't get to make use of your no, it's 0 for 2 go again almost all the time. Because let's say your opponent is really aggressive your next turn and you have to block with 3 cards, but you get to keep at least 1 blue. At least your hammer comes in for +1, and that vigor could potentially turn into a seismic surge that you make with Tectonic. If you're on Tunic, then that's that. But so 0 for 2 go again blue, block 2 is pretty good. It doesn't synergize with Anathos, but I can definitely see this in decks and wouldn't be too mad about it, and maybe even run it myself. So those are all the Guardian specific cards. Not sure if I missed any details I wanted to talk about, but let's move into some of the hybrid cards because those are also interesting. Limited equipment. Talk a big game. This one is really funny, but I don't know if it's actually going to be that good. Choose a number. The next time you deal that much or more damage to a hero this turn, create that many might tokens. It's okay. I think it's more fun than anything to play some random, like, you know, Towering Titan or a Guardian. You smack them for like 20 and you talk a big game and you say like, you know, 8 or 10 or something. And then your next turn you have 8 might tokens and it just goes crazy. But overall, I don't imagine this card will actually be good. Clash of Might. When this defends, clash with the attacking hero, the winner creates a might token. 2 for 6 is fine on rate. It has a text ability, but as for whether or not this will actually see play in decks, I'm not sure. It's hard to say. It could be that Victor, if you want to play Victor more aggressively, you go away from the Clash block cards and you instead move towards the Clash attacking cards. And also these Clash defending cards, because, you know, you can just block with this and then you reveal the top. Maybe you make a might, and then that's just free value. But I really don't know how these Clash mechanics are going to work in CC. And Limited, obviously, they have a great importance, but in CC, especially with Victor, it's hard to wrap my brain around. Battered but not broken. This is another 0 for 2 prevention instant. Create a token. Same as in my Warrior video. Not sure these will see play in CC, but it's interesting because, like, even in the Bravo mirror, for example, if your opponent plays Crippling and you block with 3 blues and this, you're blocking 8, you're stopping the on hit, and your hammer comes in for 5. But that's the equivalent thing of sort of, you know, blocking, what's it called? Blocking with 9 with 3 cards and then swinging hammer for 4. I guess if they dominate it, you can do like a card, a D-react plus this. I don't know. I don't imagine these will see much play, but it's interesting enough to consider. I'll say that. Test of Might. Once again, all of these Clash cards, they synergize really great with Victor. I don't imagine Betsy will play too many of them. She might play a few, like maybe the gold one, but Test of Might is interesting because I think gold is probably the hardest one to get for Betsy. Like, you have money where your mouth is, and like Wage Gold. I don't really love the Wage Gold, Wage Might, Wage Vigor, those cards. So maybe that's where you add in some block cards, like Test of Strength, I believe is the one that makes gold. But yeah, for this one, making a might, you can only run so many block cards in your deck before you're absolutely useless into matchups where you need to be aggressive. So not too big on the block cards. Once again, another block card. If you control a might token, you may put an attack action from your graveyard on top of your deck. Once again, great for Limited. It's like anti-fatigue tech, but CC probably doesn't matter. 3 for 7, discard this, create a might token. I don't imagine this will be run. Guardian already has a ton of poppers. It's not like Warrior, where having a popper is useful for the sideboard and potentially upside. For Dromai and Prism, you already have a lot of poppers, so you don't need this. Discarding a card to make 1 might token is pretty bad rate. So even if you turn on some on-hit effect with it, it's not amazing. It's great if you play it turn 1, I guess, but outside of that, not so much. If you've drawn a card this turn, this gets +1, so it's a 2 for 7, block 2. Don't think this matters. Don't think this will even see play in Victor. You would much rather play any other 2 for 6 with an on-hit that blocks 3. Wage Might. Once again, don't love these Wage cards. 3 for 7 is fine, and it has the on-hit. In Betsy, you can pay another 2, give it +1 and overpower. That's 8 overpower. But they're block 2s, and they're not disruptive to your opponent, so not too big on them, but maybe. We'll see. Lead with Power. I think this card is probably the most, or like the other ones, like Lead with Speed and Lead with I don't know what the Vigor one is called. But your next Brute or Guardian attack this turn gets +3. Create a Might token. This is obviously great. It's unconditional. You don't need a wager for the Might token. Your Might token will synergize with other things, like the 5/9 Majestic that gets +1, or the where is it? Am I blind? Yeah, so Might tokens will synergize with, Prime Defy. It'll synergize with Concuss, Command Respect. You can play Thump. That came out back in Tales of Aria. That's a 4 for 8 red. No, 4 for 6 red? Yeah, 4 for 6 red. If this has power greater than space, it gains Dominate, and if this hits, your opponent discards a card. So Might synergize with all of those cards, and Lead with Power just lets you generate those. 1 for 3, go again. It's basically a 1 for 4, go again, and it's on rate. So that's pretty good. In general, Guardians struggle with cards that, let you be more aggressive, and this is just that. Excuse me. Agility cards, unfortunately, Guardian doesn't get. That would be too broken with Anathos, so moving on. We have Double Down. Probably good in both Betsy and Victor. You're both going to be making gold in those decks, and your next attack, you can pay the gold to make this a 0 cost. It's 0 for 3 overpower, and it doubles your token generation. So if you play this on a bet big, you're making six tokens. It's probably going to see play in Betsy. In terms of Victor, it depends what kind of style of deck you're making. I'm not sure. Clash of Vigor. When this defends, clash with the attacking hero. Winner creates a Vigor token. So once again, maybe this sees play in Victor as like a very clash heavy deck. But then you'll struggle a lot against like KO or even Bravo or other Guardians with other big attack decks. Because if you're not consistently winning your clashes, then who knows what the deck does. Slap Happy, another 0-2 prevention. Basically talked about that, but different token. Hardy Block, same thing. Test of Vigor, same thing. A lot of these, block and clash cards are similar just for each token. Rising Energy, if you've drawn a card this turn, this costs 1 less to play. This one seems okay because it's a 1 for 6, but if it's only really applicable in Victor, and even then, Victor doesn't really have action points to really work with. In some Dreamland scenario, you have a Vigor. No, you have a Tectonic. You have a Seismic Surge. It pops. You make a gold somehow. You draw a card. This now is a 0 for 6, which is pretty cool. Not gonna lie, but will it work in the deck? I have no idea. Like maybe this is like your pretend Anathos. Like you have this in a blue, and then you pitch to make a surge, and then you play this for 6, and that could potentially facilitate your next turn. Because that's interesting now with Tectonic Plating. You can make this a 1 for 6 consistently. Am I tripping? Is this the first 2 for 6 Guardian attack action? This means it's like pummelable with 2 cards. It's like a 3-card 10 with pummel effect, which is, okay. That's something to think about now. So this one is interesting. I'll keep thinking about this one. I didn't think about that. Another discard card, make a token. Wage Vigor, again, same thing. Lead with Heart. Quite similar to Lead with Might. As to which one's better, I don't know. They're both pretty good, but you probably don't want to run 3 and 3. Maybe you go 3 and 2, 3 and 1, or 2 and 2. I don't know. But card is good. 1 for 3, go again. Basically a 1 for 4 if you count the resource. And you get to do something better next turn. Balance of Justice. We're moving on to some generic stuff. Overall, the only other huge card that's big for Guardian in the generics, I would say, like a lot of these generics are really good. But for Guardian, Down But Not Out is very interesting. When this attacks, if you have less life and control fewer equipment and tokens than the opposing hero, this gets +3 overpower, and when this hits, create Agility, Might, and Vigor. So, if you are running Anathos and you are already -1 from all of your opponents' equipment suite from a lot of decks. Like you're playing against Katsu, they have 2 weapons. You have 1. You're playing against Kasai or Olympia or Reinar with claws, Levia with claws, Saber Bolton. What else? There's a lot of decks where you're automatically just starting with 1 less equipment. Even if you're playing against Dromai, they start with the gold. You draw this turn 1. It's 8 overpower, and then you're making a bunch of tokens out of nowhere. That's pretty insane. Can Dromai even block this turn 1 without a D-React? You have 2 from Furnace. They have 1 from their arms and a 3 block. Yeah, if you're playing against, Empress Dromai and they have a gold, that's immediately 1 token they start with. There's interesting synergy with Civic Steps. Like you can give them a Quicken token and use this, but usually you want to block with Civics when they eat up their Quicken on the same turn with no bonus. Like for example, if Dash has Pistol, and she, she's going to swing again with the pistol. So you do it on the second to last pistol. So on her last pistol, she eats up the Quicken, and it's not used. But overall, this card is really interesting. It's a 3-cost, block 3. It will come in blue. So it does turn on Anathos. 6 overpower is less impressive for sure. Even 7 overpower is less impressive because that's just a card and a D-react, or a card and a block, or a card and whatever. But the red comes in for 8, which overpower, which is, I guess, sort of like the great break point for overpower. I haven't thought about that too much, but yeah, this card is really interesting. Creating all 3 tokens is huge. If we assume each one of those is worth 1, which again is not always the case, but let's just say, in an ideal dreamland scenario, this turns into a 3 for 11 if the conditions are met and you get to make use of those tokens. So it's a very conditional 3 for 11, but 3 for 11 is pretty good. A lot of people are talking about standing order. This one's less applicable in Guardian, but I think this card is really good in general. I probably will try to fit it into some decks to see how it plays. I really like effects that are able to get rid of bad arsenals because, see, the weird thing is in Guardian, you often are stranded with a bad blue that you want to arsenal, like not even Cranial Crush, like Blue Debilitate. That's never going to hit. It's bad sitting in your arsenal. You have Crown of Providence to cycle it out, but Standing Order could be interesting. But then if you're playing a Guardian deck and you have Anathos, you want things to have 3 costs, and playing Wounding Blows in a Guardian deck just doesn't really make sense. But in other decks, like maybe Ninja decks or even Warrior decks, I think the biggest strength of this card is just how flexible it is. It can act as a popper. It can cycle your arsenal. Worst case, it is just simply a 0 for 4 3 block, which is perfectly on rate. Obviously, you want to be doing things above rate, but this is one of those cards that helps like your sideboard. Like if you want to help sideboard into Dromai or into fatigue, and if you want to be a fatigue deck, for example, then this card seems perfect. But unfortunately, don't really see much potential with Guardian. Maybe more with Warrior or Ninja or things like that. But yeah, Down But Not Out is really insane. I do want to try this in Bravo, but I'm not sure if I can find the space for it, because just the fact that you already have Crippling Crush, you already have, what's that card? Crippling Crush and Starstruck, things like that. You already have so much space out of your deck. And also, as for Rouse consistency, 3 is technically still something. To pair with Rouse, you would need 10 attack on your other card, which is like Crippling or Starstruck. And that's about it. If you're playing the red, you would need 8 power. You have some 8 power blues like Thunderquake, Cranial Crush, Macho Grande. So the red, I think, is quite interesting. But yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work with like Seismic Surge or anything because it's a generic attack, not a Guardian one. But yeah. Other than that, I believe that's all of the Guardian cards. Rising Energy is like more interesting than I had give it credit for, because I don't think there's another 2-cost Guardian attack action card that works with Tectonic Plating. It does block 2, which makes it awkward, but it's pretty cool. For the longest time, I've been running 2 Pummel, but maybe I try this card out and go to 3 or something. I don't know. But yeah, so that is my thoughts on the Guardian cards and the new Guardian heroes. Overall, I think Bravo was in a good spot before Heavy Hitters. After Heavy Hitters, he's not really getting that much more support. Maybe like a few side grades here and there. You can definitely just rebuild Bravo entirely and play him around the Might cards and things like that, and that'll be super interesting to see if that works. But considering that the current Bravo deck is already like quote-unquote solved, like we have the Tunic Bravo, we have the Tectonic Bravo, and it already works pretty well. I don't imagine it'll change too much. But with all this Brute support and all this Warrior support, I could see just Guardian having less share of the meta coming up, which makes me sad because I wanted to play Bravo for the Pro Tour. But, maybe I'll try playing a Brute, or maybe I'll try playing a Warrior. I don't know if I'll just play Bravo because I love Bravo, or if I'll just play one of the new classes because I think it'll be a better meta pick, I guess. In terms of Betsy and Victor, they both have, quite different, very different play styles, which I think is important when you're having, two heroes of the same class in a set. So that'll, speak to different people. I think that's really cool. All the cards, for the most part, I like. The Clash and block stuff, I can't really wrap my head around because I'm not that kind of player. I'm sure maybe someone else can give their opinions on that. If you really enjoyed playing Oldhim back then, maybe you'll play Victor. But if you only enjoyed Oldhim because he was broken, maybe Victor won't be as good. So those are all my thoughts on the Guardians. I still have the Brutes to do left, so don't know if I'll record that video tomorrow or the day after, but this has been fun. And I don't really want to start talking about KO because that hero scares me, but you can look forward to that. So be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. And so, question. If you made it to the end of this video, comment down below which hero you're most interested playing in and why. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.